you have a big crowd out there. So I really want to make sure that we start the panel and finally get the property owner's perspective. Given that we heard about technology vendors, MSP, the industry associations. At the end of the road, it's property owners that make the final decisions and provide their feedback. So it's my pleasure to welcome Kaylin Ross, who's Senior Director of Ancillary Services at the AvalonBay Communities. Hello, Kaylin. Welcome.
Happy to be here.
Good. So, we're happy to have you. And can you tell us a little bit about Avalon and your experience with managed Wi-Fi?
Yeah, sure. So, AvalonBay, we're a big real estate investment trust, big developers, owners, and operators, ticker AVB. We are adopters of managed Wi-Fi. We believe in managed Wi-Fi. Because we are developers, we get to see managed Wi-Fi from the very beginning all the way through the operations. And with that, we've got an interesting insight into some of the areas where we're super successful with this new technology, and some of the areas where we think we need some work, right? So my job is, I always like to try to come in and talk about some of those tough things, so that we can work together as an industry to have joy in the success with the product, but also work to make it a better product, or give some real-time insight into what we're seeing. From a perspective of an owner, it is a technology enabler for us, right? And it does improve the resident experience, especially at move-in. We as an owner have done integrations with our property management systems, with all the managed Wi-Fi providers that we have used, and it survey backed up, right, does improve that resident experience. We believe in the product. We believe in providing something that is not available outside on the retail market. And we know managed Wi-Fi is that. It's also, from a development standpoint, a yield booster, right? The economics of it are real good. And we can provide a high-speed internet in a way that's not found on the retail market at a very comparable price, or even discounts to what they can get on the retail market. So it's the economics make sense, and it fits the vision of improving the resident experience, right? I'd say all this is great, and managed Wi-Fi is great, but I heard multiple times from some of the folks on the calls is if done correctly, right? And I think that that's an important thing that we have to remember as property owners, and the partnerships that were discussed with Todd is it does take a partnership. And because all these things are great, but if your infrastructure is no good, then you're not getting the full benefit of this product. So one of the things I just wanted to bring up is just the infrastructure side of it and the partnership needed on that end. So when we're developing a new property, or if we're doing a brownfield, whatever method we're moving on, it is important that we have low voltage design, and it is important that we use contractors that know how to certify our cables and not using the bottom bidder, right? That's such a huge foundation backbone into managed Wi-Fi, is making sure that everything in the infrastructure is accurate. I'd say in a lot of our developments, that has been a tough thing because you're asking, it's kind of new. It's new to the industry. It's new to some of our developers, and it requires some changes into how we think about low voltage and that wiring within our communities. So my recommendation there for owners thinking about that is low voltage design is important. You need to know before you want to make sure you know what your contractors are bidding, and you need to make sure that they have proper work scope to get this stuff done correctly. On the flip side, we have had the best success with our internet service providers when they do a double check for us. So before they install the equipment within the room, the wireless access points, or in the media panels in the unit, that they perform some quality assurance and check to make sure that those cables are accepting 1 gig speeds. And that's the kind of partnership that we need, because oftentimes, if we provide a certification, it's been difficult to assume that everything's perfect. We want those double checks, right? And oftentimes, even with certifications, something happens when another provider's in. That double check is important. That infrastructure is needed when they do the install, so that we can configure correctly, right? And that you guys can make the product the way that it's supposed to be. Without that partnership, all this is tough, right? It becomes tough when it's not operating correctly, right? The other thing that I wanted to bring up is when we say the word managed Wi-Fi, I think we need to manage. The word managed means different things to each provider, right? And I think it's important that us as owners talk to our providers about what exactly does managed mean for them. There's different levels of sophistication in the people's systems, and managed has different tiers to it. So I just be aware of what managed means. Is there transparency? Is there visibility into the managed network? Or does managed just mean, is it up or down, right? I think there's different levels there. And I believe in an MDU or a multifamily building or a luxury multifamily building, that transparency is important. And then the last thing that I want to bring up, and then open it up for discussion among the team here or other questions, is once we get the internet working, once we get infrastructure up, right? Equally important is the way we interact with our customers and the resident. And that interaction is important, especially at a new lease up, because the interactions that you provide to your resident are going to shape a behavior on who they go to when there's issues in the future, right? So outage communication, as we talked about redundancy, we know that's important, but what we know about internet is that there will be an outage somewhere, right? There's storms, there's fiber cuts, there will be an outage. So how are we communicating that outage to the property owners and the residents? And unfortunately, that's something that not all internet service providers have figured out quite yet, right? When it comes to multifamily tenants, especially in luxury apartment complexes, it is important to always inform and communicate and tell people when things are, and talk to people when there might be some intermittent service. We've got people that live in they work from their homes, they're in school, they're using their internet, as discussed, more than they ever have before. And so that communication needs to happen quick, and it needs to be concise. And then the customer service side, I want to echo what I said earlier. If the experience is bad on the customer service side, then we create a behavior where the resident now comes to the front desk of the property owner, and they start asking them internet questions. And property site teams aren't necessarily capable of answering those questions. They need to get pushed back to the internet service provider. And so we got to put a lot of stress around customer service. We've got to monitor customer service. We got to understand our interactions, and we got to be able to provide answers all the way down to the device, right? Because we've got a tenant base or a resident base who's smart, they're savvy, they need their connections, they need that kind of support. And I'll say the last thing, I'm going to add one more thing, just thinking top of my head here. Imagine a situation where a company like AvalonBay, right, or some other big name company develops a nice community, and we've got a great brand recognition, and we want to manage Wi-Fi product, and our managed Wi-Fi provider is ABX, right? Just a random provider, and the resident has never heard of ABX. He's heard of Comcast and AT&T and all these different things, but he's never heard of APX. But he researches our apartment. He shows that he or she sees there's managed Wi-Fi. He goes on Google and types in the ABX provider and sees 1,000 negative reviews and no positive reviews, right? So what I'm getting at is your brand management and your online management and your online reputation is important. And so I would put some time and energy into making sure that you're getting surveys when internet is good, not just taking the comments when the internet is bad, because nobody is going to provide a survey when internet's good, right? Nobody provides a survey when the hot water's hot. They only are going to talk about it when the hot water's not working. So creating some plan to help with that online presence, because that online presence can have an impact on the property owner and on the ISP provider that we decide to implement. And with that, those are the kind of things I wanted to say. I'm open to answer questions, Adeline, and just be here as a resource.
Thanks, Ted. I mean, it's very useful. Obviously, I think the aspect of support and customer service is one we haven't necessarily addressed clearly. And the fact that you have MSPs that don't necessarily have a good reputation, or at least, as you put it, online reviews that are not quite good, can reflect poorly on you as a property owner. Um, I wanted to ask you from a business case perspective, because we have some questions around that. Who pays for all of this, and is it the case that it's still a capex model or really an opex for you guys as a property owner?
Well, that really depends on the owner, right, and what they're able to do. I think the neat thing about managed Wi-Fi is there's a lot of different scenarios with our partners here. And if you have the capital, you can pay a lot on the capital up front and then have a lower OpEx. Or if you don't have the capital, that OpEx can be, you can fund that through the OpEx, right? And have a little bit higher of an OpEx and maybe reduce your profit margin. So, it really depends upon the owner and how much capital they have access to. Obviously from an owner's perspective, we want low OpEx and we want to keep it low. And we have the capital to pay for that, right? But a smaller community, a smaller owner might not have that capital, and they're able to still implement managed Wi-Fi and still create a meaningful product and still have a meaningful margin, but finance it through the OpEx costs.
Okay, makes sense. And are there any properties where you haven't deployed managed Wi-Fi yet? And if so, why?
Yeah, so we deploy managed Wi-Fi to all new developments. That is our standard. And I think I've got 30 communities in various stages, whether complete or contracting or wherever in those in between. Our existing communities today, we just have traditional bulk internet. And the reason we're doing traditional bulk internet is not necessarily because, it's really, we didn't want to make the investment yet in the infrastructure, right? Because it is a big investment, but we believe in it. So we moved to bulk internet as a way to, one, you start to shape the resident behavior in your communities to be okay with one provider, right? And two, you create those relationships with the provider, and hopefully in the future, if the technology's there and costs are there, you could upgrade or retrofit to that managed Wi-Fi product. There's meaningful value in the bulk and managed Wi-Fi initiatives, and they all are pushing us to our common goal of being able to provide a better product and a better internet to our residents.
Okay, maybe a final question before I open it for other panelists to discuss is: are you using managed Wi-Fi in any way to improve your staff productivity and the overall operational efficiency for things like facility IoT?
Absolutely. So, most property owners today are deploying some sort of smart access or smart lock initiatives. And in addition to that, there's a lot of initiatives out there to help reduce some different staff or try to be more, not reduce staff, but just be more efficient with how we operate, right? And a lot of those solutions to be more efficient with how we deal with service tickets, with how we deal with our maintenance staff or whatnot, require connectivity or require cell connectivity. And cell connectivity is usually not that good within a mid-rise or high-rise building. And so managed Wi-Fi has been a technology enabler for us to be able to do that Wi-Fi calling. And I like that stat that was given earlier, to allow these type of mobile devices that we're using internally to help manage costs and make things more efficient. And then the last thing, again, I want to just reiterate, it's a technology enabler, right? Tomorrow, a new technology is going to come out. And then the next day, that technology is going to change, right? It's going to continue to change and update. We want to be able to have a solution at our communities where we can have a strategic advantage to the market. When these new things come out, we can implement them. And we can with the managed Wi-Fi infrastructure.
Okay, yeah. Great. I'd like to mix it with some of the questions from the audience. There's one question that, Kaylin, you can address perhaps, is how do you acquire properties so as not to be burdened by a non-bulk close?
So
does that apply to you guys?
Yeah, so from a property owner's perspective, if our solution is to bulk, or if our solution is managed Wi-Fi, we look at those telecom contracts when we are acquiring a community, right? Depending on the contract, depending on what's there, there might be opportunities to leave if acquisition, or terminate, or a fee to terminate, right? Or sometimes there might not be anything and you might be stuck with it, right? We really don't think that bulk internet is going to drive the acquisition or not. It's one of those added benefits, right? When you purchase a community. But if you look at the contract, like was mentioned earlier, there usually is some opportunity to get out of one agreement so that you can bulk with another. And those are just things to look at. It's not always the case. Every community is different. Every contract is different. But in a lot of cases, there's usually some opportunity, whether it be pay money or at acquisition, you can get out.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, I would like to open the panel to other questions as well. I think there is an aspect that we haven't touched yet very clearly, and that is the FCC rules for multiple tenant environments. And perhaps Kevin, can you tell us given you're in Washington up there, and tell us what's the view from the NMHC about those rules and what to expect, any new rules there?
Yeah, sure. So thanks. This has been really, really informative, even for myself. So I appreciate all of this. I think the regulatory environment in Washington, at least as it relates to multifamily and broadband connectivity writ large, we've really reached a sort of status quo plateau, which is a good thing. There was a significant period of time where the industry faced proceeding after proceeding, big questions being aired, for comment surrounding the future of bulk, which we do believe does ultimately or could have some impact on managed Wi-Fi systems. But inherently, the broadband market is hyper competitive. We do believe competition, even when there isn't necessarily consumer choice at a property, because of all of these reasons we've heard today as to why someone is either choosing to deploy a bulk system or a managed Wi-Fi system. We do believe that the market is healthy behind the scenes, and that is ultimately serving consumers better. Renters often have access to better, more reliable, cheaper, faster, you name it, better service than often what is available down the block in the single family neighborhood. So we have argued for quite a while that the FCC should really avoid causing damage to that marketplace, upending the relationship at a time really, and we have to do a lot of connecting the dots in Washington, which won't surprise you, but connecting the dots between regulatory attempts to shift more of the cost or infrastructure burden to a property owner, what that ultimately does to housing affordability and ultimately the rents that a resident will pay. Clearly, that is job number one for us, is addressing housing affordability, but making sure policymakers understand all of the different pieces is hugely important. I know the reference or the regulation that we talked about briefly, at the top of the webinar, the most, I guess, recent significant one was really, at least from an ownership perspective, the biggest change was prohibiting graduated revenue share agreements. It also prohibited sale and leaseback, things that we didn't necessarily see as a huge issue, but it was really tinkering around the edges. And one of the sort of points of relief or assurances that the market is functioning properly was twofold for us. One was that the FCC did not raise questions around bulk or managed Wi-Fi, and really focused on that contractual relationship and ensuring competition is healthy in the marketplace. There's possibilities that the FCC could revisit that question. They certainly have left the docket open, that the MTE, multi-tenant environment docket. But we, Matt Ames, who's our outside FCC counsel with Hubacher and Ames, and then Ian Davis, and just a plethora of telecom attorneys across the country I speak to regularly. do a great job of tracking what's happening at the FCC to make sure that the investments owners, and importantly, broadband providers are making in all of these networks are not upended by some type of, well-intentioned but counterproductive regulation.
Thank you, Gary. A very comprehensive answer. Darren, I would like to have your views about what lessons have you learned as Cambium learned deploying managed Wi-Fi in MDUs. You talk about Wi-Fi 6, 6E, the additional spectrum, AFC, automated frequency coordination. Mm-hmm. But overall, what are the lessons from the vendor's perspective?
I think that you get the right product. There is no single one-size-fits-all, Wi-Fi technology or product. You have to pick the right product for the application. We described today high-density areas of an MDU. We described outdoor areas, apartment rooms. So get the right fit for the right zone. If you don't do that, it's going to complicate a lot of your RF planning. And even the automated tools to be able to flip a switch and say, okay, let the network sort of automatically adjust itself. It complicates that process if you don't have the right product. So pick the right products. Take a look at MDUs. Similarly, the way we look at things like student housing or even to a certain degree hospitality. These are relatively small rooms, 500 square meters to 1,200 square meter apartments in that range. And so understand that they're small enough that neighbor devices are going to see other devices. So pick the right product for the application. And then that's the number one thing that I see as sort of a mistake that happens. That's the number one mistake that I see. Another mistake that I often see is maybe trying to use older technology so stick with Wi-Fi 6. I know Wi-Fi 5 is still out there. You can still pick it up, on the market. Cambium sells some Wi-Fi 5. We have some customers internationally that are still buying that technology. But I highly recommend stick with Wi-Fi 6. Set yourself up for the future, not the past.
Okay, thank you. Brian, can you tell us your perspective of what are the differences between, say, providing managed Wi-Fi to conventional rental units versus student housing or senior living or affordable housing?
Well, I want to comment quickly on something that Kalen said, which I think was very valuable. And he talked a lot about service. We spent some time talking about hardware and physical infrastructure on this call, but it's the human infrastructure that I think is critical. And it's always been that case. Managed Wi-Fi is no different than any of the other technologies that have come and gone in multifamily over the last 30, 40 years. Some companies treat it as a set it and forget it. And I think that's a mistake. I think that this technology still requires the personal touch, the management with on-site support, and as Kalen said, alleviating the resident going to the on-site staff with any issue. That's a terrible behavior and repeat behavior, and that will crush any relationship between the provider and the MDU. But as far as the differences, I think that with an older customer, it's not necessarily conventional versus student. With student, we know these are late teens, early 20-somethings, and they still require a lot of attention. So do the senior customers and often the older customers in traditional multifamily. I think you have to be prepared in the older environment with older residents to be on site, that you may not handle it through an 800 number customer care center. That may not be how you can solve whatever issue they may have with the network or with the technology. And so being visible and being on site and being accessible for that customer is very important. As far as the technology, I don't think there's dramatic changes as far as how companies like Pavlov and some of the others on this panel support different demographic groups. I think you have to be prepared properly to do that from a soft touch perspective.
Thank you, Brian. I know that a lot of the questions from the audience have been answered in the chat box here. Perhaps a question for you, Pierre. there's been talk about low voltage design. Seems to be an important aspect in brownfield. How do you deal that with your technology? Because it's a different aspect of it.
Yeah, well, GWHN is very tolerant with regards to older cabling, whether it's telephone pairs that where DSL may have some challenges, or it's DOCSIS that is very challenging in keeping a balanced network. GWHN on coax, for instance, does not require a balanced network, does not require amplifiers, so it does simplify the deployment. What we recommend is a site survey. I think oftentimes showing up there, spend, even if it's only a few hours, depending on the size of the property, to have an assessment of how the existing network is deployed is important to make the right decision and to provide a smooth installation and activation. So we recommend that. We've put together some processes to simplify going through the motion. But what we find at the end of the day is if the telephone wire is good enough for basic DSL, if the cable TV, if the coax is good enough for basic cable TV, it's good enough for GWHN. But you want to just understand how it is laid out so that you can get the most out of it. But it will work pretty much anything out there that has been thrown at us.
Thank you, Pierre. Dan Myers has been very active on the chat box. So Todd, can you answer the question? What is your feedback on personal area networks with managed Wi-Fi?
Yeah, so a personal area network is really what's going to, there's two things. It allows mobility and security, which are the two probably biggest drivers of putting in managed Wi-Fi. Obviously, the result is a great experience for the resident. That's what we're all about, is trying to have a great experience for the resident and the leasing staff. But a personal area network is what allows that resident to move around the property as if they're behind their own router back in their unit. You know, people use the example, and it's really become cliche now, of I can be at the pool and, you know, print back to my unit a document. You know, nobody's really going to do that, but that used to be kind of the big selling point back in the day, and it's still used. But it's true. You could be anywhere on site. You could go to your residence unit or your clubhouse, and you have that personal ability to move around the property, and you're secure. You're in your own network.
Okay, thanks, Todd. Shane, so question for you. You know, with your experience at Cloud5, you know, what lessons have you learned? What interesting stories of challenges or crazy situations?
Yeah, I mean, I think that multifamily is a unique vertical, right? It's a unique asset class with a lot of different end users, right? You have the resident, you have the owner operator, you have the building itself, you have prospective residents. So understanding the property and understanding the vertical and the various subsets within the multifamily space, as some of the folks mentioned, student housing or senior living or affordable, whatever asset class it is, if it's Class A trophy high rise, you know, or if it's a 40 unit low income multifamily property that's getting funding from BEAD, the RF design and engineering and support that goes into the network needs to be the same regardless, right? Support is the number one thing I think that people look for, and ensuring that you have the ability to answer the questions of the resident, answer the issues that may come up with the connectivity on premise. It will eventually, inevitably happen. So, being a huge support organization, I think that is, one of the main drivers in this space. And it's completely different from some of the other verticals. There's a lot of folks that just do hotels and they're really good at hotels, but when you have a transient guest versus a resident, who needs that connectivity more than they value hot water, I think it's really critical that you understand the property that you're dealing with.
Okay. Well, we're almost at top of the second hour here, so I would like to maybe give you the opportunity for closing remarks before we end the webinar. Who wants to go first? Maybe you, Kaylin, as a property owner.
Sure. I just want to reiterate that it takes a partnership, and it takes that physical touch and that white glove touch with the multifamilies, with the multifamily residents, and that it is accretive and it is a value add that we can give to our residents. It just needs to be done correctly.
Okay. And you, Kevin?
Echo those words exactly. I think it goes at the heart of everything we do on connectivity is really the partnership between both sides of the equation, property owners, operators, and broadband providers, ultimately to serve our residents. That's the number one job for everybody here. So thank you, Adeline, for having us at NMHC. We appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, I'm hoping to be able to attend the OPTEC. I heard it's a great conference. And that looking forward to learning more stuff over there. Anybody else wants to provide some?
I'll just
final
say,
remarks?
you know what? I don't sell. I like to say I don't sell a service. We create an experience for residents, because that's really at the end of the day what you're doing, and it's got to be that frictionless, always on experience for the resident, and that starts with a great partner. And we will be at OPTEC. So Adeline, maybe we can meet in person.
I hope to be able to. Yeah.
I'll make
Yeah.
Go ahead, Shane.
This was a great panel, Adeline, and I really appreciate you, taking the time to reach out to the other panelists and partners here. Cloud5, we're partnering with both Positron and Cambium. We deploy their product into all of the MDU asset classes we've talked about today, and it's really nice to have leaders within the industry, Kaylin and Kevin, really echoing the sentiments from the MSP perspective that it is about experience and that we are delivering an experience for the resident, understanding that the customer, the property owner, isn't in the internet business, right? They're in the business of renting space, and so let's allow them to do that very successfully. We just give them another valuable tool in their toolbox to do that. So thanks everybody.
Yeah, and I was just going to echo the same thing. I think the one element of our tech is to understand the objectives of the real estate investor, real estate owner, and to apply it properly. It's not the same on every project, and everyone is unique. So be open to understanding what their objectives are as well.
Thanks.
Yeah. And I would add that don't disregard your brownfield MDU folio. It's a massive asset you have out there, and you can offer the same level of managed Wi-Fi, the similar level of services to your tenants as you do in the brand new properties. And there was a question early in the panel about security of personal area networks. There was a great answer there, but I would add GWHN offers port isolation and crypto along with VLAN support. That means that even two subscribers on the same coax cannot talk directly to one another. So you have full physical security at layer 2 to complement what is done as part of the managed Wi-Fi. So rest assured your tenants are not exposed in any way to any of the challenges that are there with the internet. And as they move about, they still benefit from the same, not only to print from the pool side, but also to have, I guess, assurances that things like parental control that you want for your kids as they move about the property, they still I guess, are controlled or secured by these parental controls that you put in place for your kids. And that's important as well.
Thank you, Pierre. And Darren, I'm sure you echo that.
No, have a great day, everybody. You guys were awesome. Thank you all very much. These guys on this call, Adeline, I know some of these guys from 20 plus years ago. These guys have 20, 25 plus years of experience in this market. Fantastic. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for the audience for sticking around for so long. The event has been recorded. It will be available for replay the next 24 hours, along with all the assets, the slide deck, everything. And I know that you guys have been in contact with the panelists to address some of your questions, and we'll be there to help in any way we can. So thanks again, everybody, and see you hopefully at OPTEC.
Thank you, Adlan, for setting this up.
Thanks.